Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Bernard A. Mayer. We're going to be discussing his amazing book, Fine Dining at Home by Chef Bernard. That's available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com, pretty much any online book reseller. You're going to want to head on over there and pick up copies today. And before we go any further, I want to take this opportunity and point out that Bernie was brought to our network by one of the best advertising firms in the business, and you already know I'm talking about Author Reputation Press. So listen to me. For my writers out there, if you are looking for someone to help move your masterpiece that you've just created, you got to contact ARP. They're one of the best in the business to do it, and they are proven to really help your book gain the exposure it deserves. So head on over to authorreputationpress.com today and gather all of the ways that they're going to help you do just that. And listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Bernie here on the line. There's no beating around the bush here today, folks. Right there in the title, you know what we're discussing, okay? Fine Dining at Home by Chef Bernard. This is a cookbook, okay? It's a cookbook filled with so many recipes, not only from his background, working as a chef for a number of years, but also his family's background and some of the recipes that they've created over the years. Now, you're going to want to sit back. You're going to want to make sure that you're listening intently, because this is a book you're going to need to add to your shelf. If you are someone that loves to get down in the kitchen like I do, this is a book for you, okay? This is one right up your alley. Prepared to be hungry by the time you're done here today, because that's what we have in store for you. Bernie, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today, sir?
So far, pretty good. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, Bernie, listen, this is a true pleasure, man, to have you here on the line. We have had thousands of guests on People of Distinction, but I believe this is the first time I've had a chef here with us. And this is wonderful because, like I said, by no means would I consider myself a chef, but I do love to play around and experiment in the kitchen. There's just something that is so liberating and fun about trying different ingredients and mixing them together to see what you come out with. It's almost like a science in that way, right? So I'm looking forward to this. I'm hoping to pick up some new recipes as we go. And thank you again for being a guest here with us, because I know my listening audience is looking forward to this as well. Before we jump into the book, Bernie, tell us more about yourself and your background.
Yeah, all started a long time ago. I'd say I was about 15 years old the first time I went to a restaurant. It was called Frenchie's. He wasn't French, he was Greek, but I didn't know the difference, you know. And he was a good cook, but it was a little cafe. And being in high school, I think I was in the 10th grade, and I just thought I needed a part-time job. So I went in there, and he said, yeah, our dishwasher just quit. And he thought I was 16 years old, because I should have been, but I didn't tell him the truth about my age. And then I found out later on when I had my birthday come up. I said, yeah, say it was my birthday. And the lady says, one of the ladies that worked there, she helped cook. She said, well, that makes you what? Do you just turn 17? I said, no, I just turned 16. And she looked at me and she says, you mean you've been working here all the time? I wasn't supposed to be doing that in the kitchen at 15, but I got away with it, and I learned stuff from them. And then, of course, in the future, as I went along over the years, and then I ended up working in Anaheim. I was in my mid-20s, as I was a head chef there at the Branding Iron. It's not too far from Disneyland. I'd say about a mile down the road, I think it'd be going south. And I worked there, and they had waiters, just waiters, and I had that was a busy place, especially on the weekends. So I had a hard time. I had a wheel that was complete with all the checks are going around the wheel, and another row underneath that. And I only had one little helper, a young fellow that was helping me, get things ready. And it was rough. I was really tired when I got off work at night, because we worked like from 5 o'clock till about midnight, It was late and people kept coming in, and I thought, oh my God, I'll never get out of here. But yeah, I was really tired, but I had people compliment me a lot. The waiters would come in and say, Bernie, can you come out in the dining room? I said, well, I'm not supposed to do that. I don't have a second to do that hardly. And they said, well, these people want me to cook. Okay. I grumbled, but I went out. And as soon as I walked up to the table, the people looked at me and they said, we thought you'd be much taller and heavier, because I was only 5'8", weighed 165 pounds. I was a thin guy, but I loved to eat, but I just had one of those, stomach, you could just eat anything and it never gained any weight. But I did work out with weights too when I was at home. I tried to keep in shape. So that was probably part of the reason I kept busy, and that job too. So I never gained weight, but they expect to see a big, heavy cook. And here I was, a little thin guy, So anyway, but they'd say the food was beautiful. It was delicious. It was fantastic. Everything was perfect. They were very happy. So at least I got good compliments, because I thought I was going to get chewed out when I got called out there. I thought, oh boy, they're going to tell me how bad the stuff was. But no, it was just the opposite. So I got all good compliments when people wanted me to come out there. It wasn't very often, but it did happen. So that was the positive part.
Love that. Well, Bernie, thank you very much. And listen, people, we could end the interview now, because if you're asking for a chef to come out at the restaurant, you're doing something right, okay? A lot of times, if they're going to make a complaint, they're going to complain directly to the manager. But if they want to see the chef, well, listen, something is... That's
what they said to me. They told me, and I never had them do that hardly. So it was the first time that happened at that branding hour, and I thought, oh boy, and I couldn't believe it. But I know you're true. That's true. They usually go to the managers or the maitre d's, but they actually wanted to see the chef who cooked this dinner. So I thought I was in trouble, because the waiter didn't say nothing to me. He just said, they want to see you. I said, okay. I went relentlessly, but I did go out there, but I was expecting to get the worst. And then tell me how bad it was and throw it at me or something, but it was just the other way around. They were smiling, and they said it was a delicious dinner. It was just two couples, but they said it was just great. And they were in there, I forgot what I made for them, but we had all kinds of nice stuff. And it was just the opposite of what I expected. Yeah. So of course that changed my whole thinking. I thought, wow, maybe I'm not as bad as I thought. I was just thinking that, I wasn't sure, but nobody ever complained. No, I just kept it coming and kept it going, and nobody ever really got on me about it. I had to chase a couple of waiters out of the kitchen already. They started bugging me about silly things, and I'd say, get out of here, and chase them, Because when you're really busy on a weekend, you don't have time to be listening to some waiter joking about something or whatever it was. You just got too busy, and you got to keep it straight in your head, So anyway, that's how it started. It went from one thing to another restaurant, and I started out as a dishwasher for Frenchie's. And cleaning up, and then I went to, pouring beer and stuff like that. That's where I got in trouble, because I was pouring beer before I was 16, and you weren't supposed to do that. And and then started serving things a little bit, at a time. And before you knew it, I was. One guy said, "Well, you can cook, can't you?" And I said, "Well, I've been doing it at home for some time, but I never tried it in the restaurant." He said, "Well, you can do it now," and he started me out, and that's how it all started. Little by little, I just kept going, and then I spent a year in Vietnam and in the Navy, U.S. Navy Reserves in Da Nang, and came back, and I started working again. And it was usually a night job that I did, but I did do daytimes also. I did a lot of cooking for a club, a car club that I was in called the Trans Am Club of Southern California. I was in that for about 5 or 6 years. And they'd have these parties, and they always wanted me to cook. And one time the president's wife, she was pretty good at cooking. He was Italian, and she was German, but she loved cooking for him. And she said, well, don't you cooked at an Italian restaurant before, haven't you? And other kinds? I said, yeah. So we got together, and we made all this food for over 40 members. And I made my lasagna that time, too, I remember. And it disappeared. It was a great big thing, and it just vanished. And all the people hadn't even got there yet. And a couple of them walked in a little late, and they said, who's cooking, Bernie? Well, what'd you get? Lasagna. Oh, but she said, I'm sorry, it's all gone. They just went through it so fast that but it stands 4 inches tall just about, and it doesn't sink. A lot of things do that you're frozen and you put it in the oven. It comes out looking great, but the next day, if you put any left in the refrigerator, leftovers, it sinks down about half as big. Mine doesn't. It stays solid with the meat and the mushrooms and all that. And I put spinach in it. Oh, everything. It's just really good, and it doesn't sink. It stays like that. So you can freeze it, you can thaw it out, put it back in the oven, and it's still good. So that's one thing I used to tell everybody. Mine doesn't sink. It's got ricotta cheese in it, too, because they think that'll just melt right out, but it's got mozzarella and all that other stuff in there, and it does stay up. I use the good stuff, everything, and it's just a meal. It's a real meal.
People, I'm telling you, I'm getting hungry already. My stomach is starting to rumble. I think I'm making lasagna tonight for dinner. This is incredible here. Amazon, Barnes & Noble are where you have to go. Fine Dining at Home by Chef Bernard is the title you have to pick up. And, of course, Bernard A. Mayer is the author you have to thank for bringing it to your table. Bernie, next question here. Talk to us about inspiration because, of course, we understand that this is a big part of your past. Clearly is something you could have easily have done for yourself and kept on your personal shelf. What inspired you to put it out for the public?
Well, that's something, I never thought about that until I was about, just about the time I was putting this book together. I think I was 72 then. All these years I did a lot of cooking for parties and people and made ice cream for other parties. I make it by a gallon. It's really good. And rum raisin, you got to try that. Anyway, I just all of a sudden I said, with all these recipes that I've made and all these recipes I've collected from the family and all, I ought to maybe put a book together or something because I'm retired now. I'm retiring, and so I thought I'll do that. And it just came up to me, and the name that came off the top of my head. I just said, well, let's see, we can dine at home, make nice food for the relatives, and all of a sudden the words come to my mind: Fine Dining at Home by Chef Bernard. I thought, that's it. I don't know. It just showed up in my head. I don't know, but that's where I didn't ask anybody. It just came up, and I kept it. And I thought this is what it is. It's dining at home for your guests and your family, and putting out food like you get in a nice, fine restaurant. And that's the way I did it.
Well, listen, what would you say was a highlight for you, Bernie, throughout this entire process? Or if not a highlight, maybe something that surprised you that you weren't anticipating before you began?
Well, I never gave that too much of a thought. It just kind of a lot of experience. I enjoyed cooking, and I love to do, like you were saying, I like to experiment. Mm-hmm. And a couple of those things, I just kind of threw them together, and I tried it, and then I changed one thing and put something else. And that's a lot of those recipes in there were just my creations. And I just put together and tried them or gave them to somebody else, and they liked it. And that's basically how I got going with a lot of that. It was just experimenting around. And if you like cooking, and I did like going to nice places, and I did for a little while work after I was a waiter, busboy. I went to a waiter, and I was a head waiter in this one for a year or so. And I just worked, with people and seeing how they would respond. And it's all experience over the years. And I couldn't tell you how many restaurants I worked in. I did work in a few, yes, but they were fine. 2 of them were Italian restaurants and Italian owners. So that's probably why I was into the Italian stuff, because I could cook like them. And I'd always loved that kind of food with the cheeses and everything and the sauces. And so I made pizza crust dough from scratch. And, they used to do this up in one of the beach areas, and they'd toss, I was doing it that way. It was all from scratch. And everything I was making with fresh vegetables and stuff like that, I always tried to use the best meat, best stuff, and the vegetables, everything fresh. If I had guests coming over, I had to get it the night before, and I had to get everything fresh and cut it all up. And I would never serve anything that I thought it was 3 days old. No, everything had to be fresh. And I used to even go to an Italian bakery when I can bake bread too, but I would get this real thick Italian bread from an Italian family that had this bakery near where I lived. And for years, that was a thick crust. And my father grew up in an Italian neighborhood, but he was German and Welsh. And he'd say, "Oh, I used to get invited for Italian dinners, and it was so good, that bread. That's the kind of bread that I always like to have." You can't find it much today. You have to find a real family type bakery that makes that type of thick crust. Mm-hmm. And it's in the inside is nice and soft and real fresh and good, but the outside had to be real thick. That's the way it was. It's different than French bread. French bread's not as thick. It's a little different. It's long. Italian loaf is a twist. It's thick. It's fat. It's about let's say a little over a foot long, and that's the kind of bread I like to have, because it's the real thing, the way it was made before they came to this country. And I was born in Syracuse, New York, so we have a lot of people from Europe that were from there in that area, different nationalities. That's part of it. But it's, you get used to certain things, and I would be so stubborn when I went to a bakery looking for the right stuff. If it wasn't an Italian family, and I said, "Well, you got Italian bread?" "Oh, yeah." And they showed it to me. "Well, that doesn't look like Italian bread to me." Oh, I would give up that time because I knew how it had to look. I knew how it had to be, and I was used to that. And then when it wasn't, they were imitating it. You go to Walmart, and they said, not to put Walmart down. I shop there a lot. They got one there. But they say, Italian bread. And you look at it, and it looks like a loaf of some other kind of bread. And it's real thin, and that's the crust. I said, "That's not Italian." And they call it Italian with everything? Everything what? I'm talking to myself when I say that, But it's not Italian bread, believe me, until you've had the real stuff. Then you know the difference. And my dad grew up with that, so he was used to it. And I got used to going, and I drive miles to the right place just to get the right stuff, because I didn't want it to be imitation. I wanted it to be the real McCoy. And that's where my sauces are, too. The real thing. I cook them for a long time. I mean, people say, "Oh, yeah, but that's a long time to make." I said, but when it cooks that long, the flavor is out of this world. It's so different. It's not like anything you buy in the store. It's in a jar. Believe me, it's not. It's real, and you can tell. It had to take a long time for those spices to get in there and give it that taste. That's why I do it that way. And no matter what it is. I mean, potato pancakes, I got it in an area in the book. I think it's in the Scandinavian area, but I always call them German pancakes, but because my mother, that's where she was, and she'd make them, and boy, they'd disappear. I mean, between me and my older brother, my sister was kind of young. My youngest brother wasn't born yet most of the time, but boy, she'd make those pancakes. She couldn't make them fast enough, and they were all by scratch. Everything she did that way. And that apple pie that's in my book was hers. The dough, everything, the way she did it. I used that. And my grandmother that came, she was born just after they got to Europe. Her two older sisters came from Berlin or Germany, in that area, West Germany. One of them was from Berlin. And that's the way they did everything. And she could make the best, sour gratin I've ever had in my life. I've had a restaurant never taste like that. Hers was really good, and her hot potato salad. She just knew how to do it. And, I put those in there because I said, I got to get Grandma's recipe. My mother would tell me, I can't even make it as good as my mother. And that's who I was talking about, and it's just something else. You can tell right away. I made it for some of my friends. One time, one of them passed away, and I made it for his family. The potato salad, the hot potato. They said, "I never heard of a hot potato salad. They're usually cold." I said, "Not like this one. It's got vinegar and onions, and it's different. And it's got cucumbers, and it's just different. And when you taste that, you can tell. That's not like any potato salad you bought in a store or had in a restaurant. It's just different because it comes from Europe. And some of those recipes are over 100 years old. I know they were because my great-grandmother, back in 1958, I think she reached 102. She came from Germany, and that's the old country. They knew how to cook stuff, and you just don't get stuff like that anymore unless you get it from somebody who had a background like mine that had relatives that came from there and used to cook that stuff like that. Because they didn't believe in using anything but the real McCoy, and you had to make all the ingredients. They had to all be fresh, and all that, like the pie, they roll it out, My mother never made a pie with a store-bought crust. It had to be homemade, everything.
Bernie, as we close out here, this is fantastic. And there has been so many fantastic recipes that you've already brought up that are really intriguing. Now, I know this may be hard because from an artist's perspective, whenever I create anything, it's difficult to put one above any other creations, but entertain me and try to give us one here. You've mentioned a few different recipes. Bernie, do you have a favorite?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that lasagna. That's one of mine. And also, I love that smoked salmon. That's in there. That is really good. Yeah, I do that on the barbecue. But you have to put it in foil, leave less room in it. But that is delicious salmon. It's a smoked salmon, and it's really good. I've given it to some of my best friends. One of them in Palm Desert. They were having a barbecue, and they wanted to know how to make a fish type of dish for on the barbecue. And I told them how to make that salmon. And it's got lemon juice in it. It's got a little bit of cayenne pepper. It's got a little bit of that dillweed. And you put that, on the salmon, you slice it a little bit on top so it kind of goes down in. And then when you put the foil over it, when you put lemons and also the red raisins on top as a garnish, and you put that in there and you cook it for 20 minutes in medium heat, and it comes out fantastic. It really does. And it just falls apart. When you take your fork and touch it, the pieces just break off real easy. That's when it's perfect. And it is. It's just something else. And that's the kind of salmon I love. Because I was never a big fish eater years ago. And I thought, boy, that salmon, I never liked salmon either, years and years ago. But today, I recommend that dish. It's fantastic. And it's just delicious. And they used it to invite their friends over. And these people live in a gated community, a golf course, country club, that kind of thing. So I never met all their friends, but I know if anybody lives in that area, you better not serve them anything bad. So anyway, and I offered to cook for people like that too. I said, if they want to hire me to come in and just be a chef and make some food for their guests, it can just be for one night or something. I don't care. I'll do it. I expect them they'll give me something for doing it, just appreciate it. But it would be nice, and I wouldn't mind doing it. Because if you like cooking, that doesn't bother you. And if you take pride in your work and do it perfective, that makes a difference. That's how I feel when I do something. And I check everything. When I go through the ingredients and I measure them all out. I do that. And then when I put them together, I make sure I put them in the right order. Everything's got to go right. It has to be that way. Otherwise, it could come out wrong. So I'm just a picky guy. Everybody always says, oh, you always were a perfectionist in anything you did. So that's me.
There you have it. People, listen, you know where you got to go. If you're like me, not only are you starving, you're already heading on over to Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Okay, you're getting ready to purchase copies of your book because you understand how valuable this is to add to your shelf. One last time, we're here on the line with Bernard A. Mayer. We just finished discussing his amazing cookbook, Fine Dining at Home by Chef Bernard. Bernie, this has been a true pleasure, an absolute delight. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Thank you very much.